I just love Ruth and her unique way of planting and making a difference in the world in her own way. Today we're going to look at a scripture text that you've heard many times. And I'm also going to address something you've also heard many times. If you're a Christian, you were raised being told, preach the gospel always. So I finally asked the question, well, what exactly is the gospel? I think the gospel is just this. I think that Jesus was sent here so that we could love one another. Not only love one another, but do so in a way that makes the world a better place. I believe that is the heart of the gospel. That love was shared with us, and in order for that love to live, we have to share it in the world in very real ways. I've said before, I believe Jesus was all about making circles bigger and letting everybody into the circle. He was all about playing together and playing fair and lovingly, and then just simply transforming the world with love. I think that's the gospel. And I believe that he did not give a specific line of exactly what it is to his disciples because he knew it was going to be unique to each and every one of us, how it was that we go about doing that. And so that is my take on the gospel. And with that said, I'm going to take a look at a harvest story. This is the Message. If you recall, it's almost been a year now where Eugene Peterson, the guy who translated the Bible, as a big part of his career, passed away. And we took a year to mainly use the Message as our translation of the Bible. So this is his take on this story. At the same time, Jesus left the house and sat on the beach. In no time at all, a crowd gathered along the shoreline, forcing him to get into a boat. Using the boat as a pulpit, he addressed his congregation telling stories. What do you make of this? A farmer planted seed. As he scattered the seed, some of it fell on the road and birds ate it up. Some fell in gravel. It sprouted quickly but didn't put down roots. So when the sun came up, it withered just as quickly. Some fell in the weeds. As it came up, it was strangled by the weeds. Some fell on good earth and produced a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. Are you listening to this? Really listening? Why tell stories? The disciples came up and asked, "Why do you tell stories?" He replied, "You've been given insight into God's kingdom," or the gospel, "and you know how it works. Not everybody has this gift, this insight. It hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. That's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge the people towards receptive insight, and I would say towards love." Pastor Jennifer Andrews Reckerle shares this great story about growing up on a farm. She grew up on a farm where there was a man named Frank. And Frank lived in a farm not far from her farm, and he was like the typical farmer, right? Bib overalls and kind of a messy kind of guy, now farmers, you're not all messy. I don't know. But anyway, you think about a farmer, that's what Frank looked like. And she said she remembers Frank from the time she was a little teeny girl because he would always come over with loads of produce all growing season long. He always had something to share with his neighbors. And what's interesting is that when you tried to thank him for those gifts, he would say, no need to thank me. Those are just some of old Bessie's volunteers. Now, Bessie was his tractor. And Frank used Bessie to seed his fields. But Bessie was a little temperamental. The device that shot the seeds out into the field, well, it didn't really work right. It wouldn't turn off when it was supposed to. It wouldn't turn on when it was supposed to. And, well, it just would go about spewing seeds everywhere. Invariably, she would spray seeds in the barn, in the ditch, in the fields, along the roadsides, and even along their house. Though he would curse and yell at old Bessie, Frank never seemed to get that glitch fixed. And I guess he loved Bessie enough never to get a new tractor either. Some say that Frank loved farming, yes, in the fields, but he saw those volunteer plants created by Bessie as his ministry. In a lot of ways, I think the sower that Jesus talks about in the text today is a lot like Bessie, that tractor. Jesus says the sower throws seeds all over the place, on the path, on the rocky ground, among the thorns, and in good soil. When you sow in such a manner, there is always a chance of some volunteers showing up. And sometimes those volunteers produce good things. Here's a volunteer that showed up in Rhonda's yard. This is a tomato plant that Rhonda did not plant. And it has been there for a couple of years now. 2 years now. They have had produce off of that plant on a regular basis, and Rhonda has no idea how it got there. Now, this text traditionally has been used to say, you better be careful with your seeds, right? You better be careful where you put them. You better be careful to prepare your fields. Remember last week we talked about preparing the fields appropriately. But Bessie, the tractor, and the garden itself makes me reconsider this text in a little bit different way. See, I think the truth about life is we've been given seeds, and it's our job, wherever we find ourselves, to plant those seeds of love in the world. If the sower is careful, yes, the sower can plant a good field of seeds, but it doesn't stop with that one planting. Our entire life experience is a series of planting opportunities. Each step we take, each situation we're in is an opportunity to sow love in the world. And what does that mean? It means leaving whatever your environment you're in a little better than how you found it. I think that's Jesus' point. He's encouraging his disciples to spread the good news no matter what, even if it falls on deaf ears, even when folks don't seem to get it, even when you leave a place that doesn't look any better and maybe even a little worse than when you arrived. Chances are, if you leave some goodness there, it's going to take hold in some way and make a difference. And in that way, those volunteer seeds take root and make a difference in the world. Jesus' advice goes against any sound business practice, right? You wait, you make sure you're ready, you get out there and plant your business, and then you see what kind of profits you have. I think what Jesus is saying is just do your best all the time to leave a little love in the world. This is a picture of Dr. Joe and his wife, Sarah Ellen Mamlin. Like so many doctors, Dr. Joe went to med school, right? Graduated from med school, wanted the American dream like so many of us do. But he wanted to volunteer his time before getting into that practice. So he volunteered for the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps sent him to Afghanistan, where it was his job to try to work with the medical school that had been established there. It was a very, very difficult task, but Joe and Sarah Ellen lived in Afghanistan. They planted some seeds there in a very difficult culture, and while he was there, he created a textbook that the students would later go on to say they felt like it was a gift from heaven. We all know Afghanistan is a difficult place to be, and well, Joe left that place, left some seeds, and went on with his life, had a great family, lived in Indianapolis, and worked at the IU Med School. He could never stop thinking about that experience he had had in Afghanistan, because the only thing that was going to make that work was for the doctors in Afghanistan to be able to take on the program that he left. He thought it was a really good model for trying to teach and be involved in other countries. So they decided they would go ahead and try it someplace else. So in came Kenya. He went to Kenya in the midst of his working career, and he helped plant a program called AMPATH. And it is an academic model for providing access to health care for everyone. It's a shared model where there are doctors at Moi University in Kenya that share in the exact same responsibility as the Americans that come in, and they built a practice together. Joe worked in this incredible program until 1992 when he decided to retire. No, he left before then. What happened was he retired in 1992, and he decided to head back to Kenya to just share in the program for a year or two. Well, when he got there, he discovered that in 1992, the AIDS epidemic had taken off in Kenya. It was a culture that was being devastated by this terrible disease. And so Joe, the year of his retirement, decided that he would go ahead and see if he might be able to make a little difference and to plant a few more seeds. In April of this past year, Joe retired for the second time from the program in Kenya. And in that time, since his retirement, they have created a program that they say has had the biggest impact on those who have suffered from AIDS in the whole world. In fact, he has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. He has created a program that can exist, that took hold, that's made a difference in the lives of a lot of people. There was an effort started right at the garden called The Power of One that worked with this program as well. I have had the honor of going to Kenya and witnessing what an amazing shared program it is. And it was all because one guy volunteered for the Peace Corps, put some seeds down, wasn't quite sure what the lasting impact was, but saw that it made a difference in his own life. And then he took those gifts and he planted them in Kenya with some other colleagues. Now this is a model, an educational model that is going throughout the world and they believe will continue to transform the world. And its greatest impact has happened since 1992 when Joe retired the first time. I love this program. I love this man. He's a remarkable man. He's a good United Methodist. I love his wife, who has been committed to the program as well. And I love that he didn't give up after Afghanistan, just planting some seeds wherever he could. I'd like to introduce you to somebody else. This is Rodney Robinson. Rodney Robinson grew up in a household where his mother was in the midst of segregation and was not able to be educated. When he was in high school, he played football. And he would wait after football class after football practice because his mother would be in class working to get her GED. They would walk home together and she would always say to Rodney, "Rodney, the most important thing in this world is an education." Those seeds didn't get planted till much later in her life, and he saw the difficulty she had in life because of it. And then he decided that he could make a difference in the lives of some other people as well. And it was his mother who encouraged him, who gave him the energy he needed to go to school to be a teacher. Robinson decided really early on that education is something that should, of course, be available to everyone, and he probably could have gotten a job in really any school system he would want. But instead, he decided he wanted to create a program at the Virgie Binford Education Center, which is in the Richmond Juvenile Detention Center in Virginia. He wanted to work particularly with those young men who were raised in rocky and thorny soil. Well, this past year, Rodney was named the National Teacher of the Year in this school system. People say he creates a positive school culture by empowering his students, many of whom have experienced trauma, becoming civilly minded social advocates who use their skill and voices to affect physical and policy changes not only in their schools but in their communities. These young men who have been given kind of a life sentence early on have one man who is willing to enter into that thorny, rocky field and say, "You matter." I can guarantee you that the students that graduate from his program will be the students that we hear in the future who will continue to make a difference in this world. Why? Because he is sowing seeds where they need to be sown, in the manner they need to be sown. And he's transforming the lives of every young man he encounters. It's It's an important lesson for us, isn't it? Especially those of us who have careers where we want to make a difference in the world and we want to get in the best institution with the best students, with the best. Guess what? Sometimes the best are kind of stuck back in a corner, and we got to go find them. And we got to plant those seeds in whatever way we can. I am so excited that Rodney was Teacher of the Year. I am so excited that we're taking note that what's important in life is you figure out why God has put you here, and then you seek to find yourselves in situations where you can live into that goal, into the path that God has given you, and then you just throw seeds out there willy-nilly and see how God will make a difference through the likes of you. Stephanie Rose, in 2006, Stephanie Rose developed this headache, which ended up being years and years of health challenges for her. Serious health challenges. Diagnosis after diagnosis, difficult situation after difficult situation. Her physical health was terrible, which then had an impact on her emotional health and her mental health as well. For years, she did what she could to try to make herself healthier. She had finally had it. She had had it with physical therapy. She had had it with talk therapy. She was done when a friend said to her, "What about instead of going to therapy this week, you just go ahead and work in your backyard?" At this point, she was just so desperate to feel better about life. She got some planters, and she went to work, planting in some planters. It gave her something to do every day. It gave her a focus other than herself. And it was amazing what happened with just a few plants, how she ended up developing this love for the earth and for just planting and getting her hands dirty. She realized why she was here. Soon she took her whole backyard and she rototilled it up and started planting produce and started planting flowers and all kinds of things. People took note that this woman who they thought had been perhaps on her deathbed was suddenly transforming her own yard and her own life just simply by planting some seeds. People would come to see her garden. They would want to be part of what it was that she was doing. She started taking classes to become a master gardener. In the midst of all of this, God gave her a vision that it was her job to create a program called Garden Therapy. She created a program in California called Garden Therapy, and it's exactly what it says it is. Now she has this huge organization that provides spaces for people to connect with the earth. That's her sole purpose. The first project was with some people who were struggling with addiction. They took over her front yard, and it was amazing how that front yard was transformed. She has taken on programs and taken them into schools and offered kids seeds for free, and the whole community is changing dramatically. Why? Because one woman decided to put her hands in the earth because nothing else was working. What a wonderful image for all of us. If you come here today and life isn't working, what is it that God is calling you to put your hands into so that God can work through the likes of you to transform this world? So you've got to find the things that remind you of just how much God loves you, because there is no way to transform the world unless you realize just how much you're loved. Then that love fills you and fills you and fills you, and soon you're throwing up love all over the world, and you don't know what to do with yourself but to share it with other people. It's amazing when we believe in the powerful possibilities that God has already planted in us, how God can and will transform us and transform this world. Friends, as you come here today, you may find yourself on rocky soil. You may find yourself in a good field. You may find yourself with hard soil. You may find yourself not even clear where you are. Well, accept the love of God right now, right here today. Be filled with that love. And all that God asks is that you leave a little bit of that everywhere you go. It doesn't matter what the soil is like. It doesn't matter what the world is like. Every situation you're in is an opportunity to transform the world with the love of God. How does the garden grow? How does your garden grow? First, you accept the unconditional love of God, and you accept it fully in such a way that you can live your best life and transform the world with the seeds of love. Amen.